play a game?
Why, yes, I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Getting geeky in Little Rock, it's Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Thanks so much for tuning in. And this week, I have a returning guest from really just 2 or 3 weeks ago, Adam Lawson, who turned out to be not only doing cool stuff with his The Kill Journal horror graphic novel, but is also involved with an upcoming new tabletop role-playing game called Asunder. And joining him on that journey are a couple of other people, not the least of which is Robert J. Schwalb, who should be no stranger to people who have more than a casual acquaintance with tabletop role-playing games. So we're going to be talking today about this. It's about to go to Kickstarter on the 17th, November 17th, and today is the 12th. So this will release next week. By the time this podcast comes out, this Kickstarter will already be going or impending. And what I researched it some, but as often do, I only research so much because I want to be surprised by what my guests tell me. Adam, real quick, do you want to give an update on the Kill Journal?
So the Kill Journal has been a total success. We're funded. We're on our second 30 days of the campaign. It's been awesome. The support in making horror graphic novels is so fun. One of the reasons why, speaking of Rob, this year, why I was really intrigued when Brian Engard initially showed me Shadow of the Demon Lord, because I love dark, gripping tales, and the Kill Journal is that, and it's been a great success. So thank you for having me on about that, Shane. It's doing great. Well, now we're just unlocking stretch goals and getting the mini stories added on. We've already broken the first one, and we're about ready to hit the second one, and so it's been great.
Yeah, very good. And if people didn't hear the show with Adam a couple weeks ago, one, go check it out. It's a good show. We talk not just about the graphic novel, but about our love of horror movies and who would win, Jason versus Michael Myers and which version and all that. So we got nice and geeky on a horror level. Adam was also the producer on the tabletop show that was so popular among tabletop board game players. And he's also been involved with the film industry, not the least of which you were involved with Snakes on a Plane, but other things as well. So Adam is a very interesting person. So go listen to that podcast if you haven't already. And also we have Robert J. Schwalb, who, if you don't happen to know, or if you don't know everything he's done, he's been involved with multiple versions of the Dungeons & Dragons. I know the 4th and 5th edition, definitely. Were you involved with any other editions, Robert?
I wrote quite a bit for 3rd edition.
Did you? Okay. You have founded your own company, and you have a very popular gaming system called Shadow of the Demon Lord, which is what a lot of people know you for now. You've also worked with Numenera. You've worked with The Strange. I was looking, you've got like 200 credits to your name with gaming industry in some form or fashion, and also you've got a novel under your belt, so you've been out there doing it. And you also, I happen to be pretty good friends with Russ Morrissey with Ian Publishing, and I didn't even realize I've got it sitting over here right on my shelf, the Worlds of 2000 AD Judge Dredd role-playing game, which is just a beautiful book. So do you want to, before we talk about Asunder, Robert, do you go by Robert or Rob? What's most comfortable for you?
We'll go with Rob tonight.
Okay.
Friendly people, it's Rob.
Okay, so Rob, do you want to get...
Well, it's something else.
Okay. Well, thank you for allowing me to refer to you as Rob. So what are there any updates not related to Asunder that you would like to make sure to get out there?
Well, Asunder is, I'm very excited about it. In addition to Asunder's ongoing development and imminent arrival into the world of gaming, I am busily working on Shadow of the Weird Wizard behind the scenes, which is a world that uses the Demon Lord engine, explores a new magic system. It makes some tweaks to the core engine, but most importantly, it is family friendly.
Whoa.
Everybody.
What?
Everybody can play it. And Shadows of the Demon Lord is not necessarily known for family friendly, so that's a pretty big update.
The Demon Lord is not, he likes to eat families. The Demon Lord is friendly to family.
Well, he is a Demon Lord after all. So
Right.
you would expect a certain amount of demon lordness. So I love the name of it, The Weird Wizard. I know nothing about it other than what you've shared, but it evokes that sort of 70s cool Michael Moorcock kind of fantasy, or Jack Vance or something. I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but it evokes that for me.
Yes.
Yeah. So I love that a lot. Also, okay, so I have we talked about this a little bit before we start recording. I'm hoping my memory is right and I'm not conflating something. Were you in Hot Springs for SpaCon a couple of years ago? Do you remember being
I was.
Okay, so I have.
Uh-oh.
Do you recognize this?
Oh, yeah. I sure do.
So what I'm holding for the listeners at home is a custom-made leather wristband that looks like something that Grognar the Barbarian would be wearing. And Rob was in a panel at SpaCon with Hot Springs, along with, I can't remember the guy's name. He was really cool. He was one of the main people for Pathfinder from Paizo. Who was that? Do you remember?
SRM, Stephen Radley McFarlane.
Very nice guy. During the panel, you would randomly yell stuff out and toss these little leather wristbands into the crowd. And this one you had actually worn, and you took it off your wrist. And so not only do I have a Robert J. Schwalb custom wristband, but it's got your sweat in it. Yeah.
It was dripping sweat, but yes.
So for the duration, in your honor, for the duration of this interview, I'm wearing my Grognard we'll call him Grognard the Barbarian wristband. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So there's one other person I want to make sure to bring up, and then I'm going to talk with Rob a little bit. He's got to leave earlier than Adam does, and we want to respect his time. Who is the other? You've mentioned more than once with me. There's another designer in the mix here that's been doing a lot of the design work based on the Shadows of the Demon Lord engine. So did you want to throw him some love real quick?
It's Brian Engard.
Yeah.
He worked on a game called Fate Core. He's also created some of his own other original games. An amazing writer, and he's who turned me on to Rob's work. Or I should say, not Rob's work, but Shadow of the Demon Lord.
Right.
Because and I remember when I read Shadow of the Demon Lord, Rob, it was like, I was like, somebody finally made the role-playing game I want to play. Right? In a fantasy setting, because I'm kind of a World of Darkness fan, and I always felt like, between Pathfinder and D&D, I was always a little light, right? And I felt like, that like when I read that book, I was like, and that system and the way it was designed, I was like, ooh, this is, if Joe Abercrombie was writing, the fantasy role-playing game, this is something that took it to a place that's going to push boundaries. And, and even, here's a funny thing in the lore of Asunder, right, Rob, is that the Gaia, who's like the presence inside of the planet, she's starting to consume it, right? And the gods who are over this planet,
is she just angry, or is she hungry, or why is Gaia doing this?
She was imprisoned.
Okay.
And she's wanting to escape. And so when people die, she consumes their essence and gets stronger, and ultimately with the idea of jettisoning off the planet. But the gods left the planet and early on, and when they did, they took all the metal to go fight a war, right? That's the myth left in the Keeper's Tome. The answer to the war that they're going to fight... And
we're talking about Asunder here, to be very clear,
yes.
Not Shadows. Okay.
Yes, and in the myth of it, who they're going to go fight is the Demon Lord, right? That's the...
So there's a direct connection there.
Yeah, there's certainly a connection. It's mentioned in the title of the game, in the beginning of the game, hey, that the system, uses a lot of what was created there. Obviously, we've modified it to our world and our setting. And also to the fact that we have chaos and we have living weapons and things that aren't present in Shadows of the Demon Lord, in Shadow of the Demon Lord. But the one thing that I think that we inherited the very best, or two things I would say, is the path system, which is so much more fun than classes, and boons and banes.
Well, tell us a little bit about that then. Rob, tell us a little bit about the path system.
Rob, you're the creator of the paths. So you tell us.
A couple of things when I was working on with Demon Lord's design goal was to try to step out of the way, play things they want to play, and to facilitate that end, I divided up character progression into 3 or 4 meaningful chunks. So character creation starts off with one major big choice, with a few smaller things you'll be doing, what you'll be doing. Then as you play through the campaign, every time your group finishes an adventure, your group gains a level. and then you make another interesting choice. And that choice happens at level 1, level 3, and level 7. And so what happens is that you start off small. So you start off with a novice path. So you'd be, in your very first starting adventure, you might just be some dirt farmer or a grave digger or whatever. But you manage to kill a zombie and hand-to-hand combat, and you feel pretty badass. And so you become a warrior as your first choice as your novice path. Now, 2 levels later, you get to make another choice about your character, and how your character develops. And you could choose to do something where I want to build on with the ideas that I started with this first guy. So maybe I'm going to choose a path that's going to be more about hunting undead. Or maybe something happened in the campaign so far where you found this bizarre, screwed-up tome of darkness that's wrapped in zebra skin but held together in chains and tongues.
It's amazing how often in an adventure you find a tome of darkness that's held together by zebra skins and chains and tongues. It's right. Practically a trope these days.
It's everywhere. But so you manage to crack open this book, and you're looking inside, and you get all the magic goodness inside, and you realize, I'm going to pursue necromancy.
Okay.
And so you're now starting to raise dead. And so your third path choice is your master path. And the master path allows you to take another step on the road to your character development. So what happens is that you could have, and these are equally valid choices, you could go like, warrior fighter, weapon master and have a lot of fun, or you could do warrior wizard necromancer or something along those lines and also have a lot of fun. And be able to have your character choices, your mechanics, reflect the things that have happened in the story. And so that was kind of the goal and actually the product of what the path system does.
So it does.
It's really cool. It's really cool because, like, Rob, what's happened in my home game of Asunder, somebody started out as a vanguard, and in our world, that's like a leader in military situations. And so they have all these powers to help assist people. And then along the way, when they were leading, under pressure, they got addicted to demon blood. Nice. It became this addiction that they were hiding, right?
Again, another hazard of adventuring is getting addicted to demon blood.
To demon blood. Another famous problem. And so then, as a result, at their expert path, they chose a Ravager, which are people who've been able to channel this addiction to give them crazy raging powers. So it went from this leader in combat to he's gone the opposite direction, right? And so the story shaped his powers versus, like you're saying, a traditional system with a class where you just level up in those abilities. And I think that's such a fun way to experience a fantasy RPG.
Yeah, from the design side, there's always a tension between giving too much choice and too little choice. And I think that for novice players, having very little choice is a good way to go because that gives them the opportunity to master what they're doing over time. I mean, I think back to when I was playing D&D when I was a youngster. You just play a fighter and you get nothing except you're more accurate and more hit points and maybe better gear. But the better gear doesn't happen by dint of your advancement. It just happens because you're able to kill things, and you might get extra attacks if you live long enough. So, in a class-type system or any system that structures your progression in that way, in D&D and various editions of it have offered players the ability to customize their character by adopting micro-systems like feats or powers or whatever else. 5th edition, with that game, we decided to take a different direction where we gave these subclasses, and so you're making one big choice about your class, and you make a second choice, and then you're pretty much done. Because Demon Lord and Demon Lord games tend to be shorter, so 10 sessions long for a campaign or whatever, you can give 3 meaningful choices that kind of also highlight as the risk that goes up, and then also you're delivering all these nice, juicy, chunky bits of tech wrapped in a story container, which I think is really important.
Nice. So I want to follow up on what you just said with a couple of things. One, I've been on record multiple times saying, but anytime I have a chance to say to somebody who is involved with 5th edition, I like to say it to them. 5th edition is a really good version of D&D. I think that there was a lot of really good design choices made.
Sure.
And its popularity, its popularity is not just because of Critical Role. Okay, I mean, Critical Role didn't hurt, and it helps a lot, but it's also a really good system for new players to play, in my opinion. It's not rules light, and it still feels crunchy, but it dumped some crunch, but while also giving some freedom of choice and that sort of thing, and a lot of character options and all that. But the main thing I wanted to ask about, specifically on Shadows of a Demon Lord and now Asunder, I'm curious, was there an intentional choice, or did it just kind of happen to work out that campaigns tend to be shorter? You mentioned something about approximately 15 sessions.
Does Asunder go beyond level 10?
Asunder does not go beyond level 10, Rob. We kept it exactly in your system. Okay. And I think that, and I appreciate that, and I also think what's nice about it, because the way you kind of level up, in Shadows as well as Asunder, right, is that the keeper essentially says, our world is a keeper, right, as the game master. It says you go up a level. So sometimes you can have 2 or 3 sessions that happen in one night, if you will, of story. Right. And so maybe you don't level up in those 3 sessions, and you can kind of base it on where your group is at. So, but I think that's what I feel though, Rob. The amount of time that I've taken a character to 15th level in D&D is 0, right? Naturally, yeah.
With Demon Lord's level progression and kind of capping it at 10 certainly came from meetings I was involved in during the development of 5th edition, where we're just gathering data from the audience about how long campaigns last typically, how long gaming groups sit together, and the D&D has always wrestled with a promise of 20 to 36 levels of gameplay. If you remember, if in 2nd edition, in the high-level options, they take the game, they cap it at 36. And, when I ran a 5-year campaign in 2nd edition, and we capped out at around 13th level, 14th level after 5 years. So thinking about that, and the fact that groups tend to fall apart after 2 months, it became...
honestly, all joking aside, is that a stat? Or you just, is that a snarky stat or a real stat?
That was a stat.
2 months. So 2 months. It's like new small businesses. The majority fail, but then the others keep going. 80% or something of small businesses fail within 5 years or something like that.
Think about it though. It's like you get a new game. You're excited. You get everybody together, and you can get everybody together for the first couple weeks, and then you start dropping players off.
Right.
And then after the second month, your whole game falls apart. Wow. So knowing that what reality's like, and the embarrassment of riches that is the options for entertainment out there, I wanted to build a game that you could get the full play experience in the time that you have, that most people have allotted to it. So if you can do 8 game sessions over 2 months, you can go the extra 2 and finish out a campaign of Demon.
Wow, that's cool. So you can actually experience the full. And I don't even know if you'd consider it a power curve or not, but you can narrative story wise, and to see where your character can go, you can experience. I'm just going to throw out a number: 6 months or less. Sure. 4 months, 3 months, something like that. I know some groups meet once a month, so
sure.
You get a bunch of adults, especially you got jobs, marriages, kids together, and all that stuff or whatever. It can be hard to get an ongoing group going. So I think the way you've tackled it with Shadows of the Demon Lord and now Asunder will benefit from that is a really great way of doing it. You're not committing to 5 years of your life to see a story or a character all the way through.
The other thing about at least the Demon Lord, there's no expectation that the next adventure you play through is going to happen the next day or the week after. Between adventures, you could have 6 months to a year. And the story you're telling, these are the highest water moments of your character's life.
Right.
And with making every adventure, Demon Lord adventures are typically playable in a single session of 2 to 4 hours on purpose, so that you also eliminate the problem of missing players next time you play. I'm
nodding a lot while you're talking because it's hard to do.
Rob, I think also one thing that we also chose with Asunder, because I think you were kind of tipped off in Shadows of the Demon Lord, is all of our modules and all of our prompting for keepers is to start each session in the middle of the action.
Yeah.
So instead of So we would start an adventure, and it's like, all right, so and so, a grave robber has a knife to your throat, and he wants the gem you stole from him last week. And the adventure starts there instead of, well, we're at the pub for a while and then we get into a bar fight and then somebody needs to hire some mercenaries. Nothing wrong with that. But once again, I think in the interest of excitement. And then we added this element to Asunder, or I shouldn't say that it's not so much a rule as a keeper's prompt is to use a 6-sided dice whenever there's a time crunch. And let's say you come to the scene of a crime and there's a murder in the back alley. And you hear some yelling down the street and the militia's been called and the keeper rolls a 6-sided dice and it comes up to number 3. And the keeper holds that number up and sets it in front of him and says, great, you guys have 3 choices before the militia shows up. Or 3 rounds of action, right? To help keep keep this sense of energy about it. So that then by the end of you're saying a 2 to 4 hour session, you've got the highlights, right?
I like it.
And I think that you really inspired that when in your writing, when you were saying, hey, let's make these campaigns and these adventure modules meant to be actually played through.
Right.
And I think that with small prompts and a small push from the storytellers and players to think that way, it really changes the campaign. There's another element in Asunder that's also in the Shadows that was so great. It's called Fatal Flaws, right? And what happens is when a character's fatal flaw gets triggered, let's say I can't stand authority, and Shane, you're the law, and you want answers from me.
I am the law.
I don't want to give you those answers, even though I'm not necessarily in trouble yet. So we get into an argument about it, and the keeper says, your fatal flaw has been triggered. You've got to escalate the stakes. So you can choose to say, no, I'm not going to. And that's no fun for anyone. Or you can say, I'm going to do it. And by doing so, you get a secret point by giving in to your fatal flaw.
Okay, so you don't get penalized, but you get rewarded.
You get rewarded.
Okay, so it's not like you get the DM or the GM threat or the keeper threat or something.
Right. But it's a way to prod players to escalate the stakes in a moment. Hey, your fatal flaw has been triggered. You have a thirst for violence. It's being triggered. And then it helps prompt the keeper to help prompt players to act on their character versus to act on maybe the most efficient thing to do. Right.
Role play. Don't, set back and treat it like you have all the time in the world and you can figure out the best method. And I'm not saying that's metagaming, but it is, it's better if you get into your character. That's what you're there for, right? It's role playing, ROLE. So, I'm hearing a lot of things why Asunder, and what we'll do, we'll get more into the setting and the world of Asunder.
Sure.
I'm going to probably throw my flag anyway. So
okay. Well, hey man, thanks so much for joining. It was a pleasure having you. Thanks again for the wristband.
No, Rob, it's good to chat. I appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you.
I can't wait to see the product. I'm very excited.
Okay, be good.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for joining.
Take care.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right, that makes a good point to take a quick pause and do some show notes, and we will be back with Adam Lawson and our discussion about Asunder RPG and RPGs in general here in a moment. You can always contact me on Twitter at ShanePlays, that's ShanePlays, or you can email me at shane@shaneplays.com. Speaking of shaneplays.com, ShanePlays.com, you can always find notes and links and etc. for every podcast right there on the blog. So if you want to know more about the topic or guest on any particular episode, or if I mention a link and you're like, oh, I want to make sure to get that, just go to shaneplays.com and you'll find it. Last week's show is out there. It's on the blog and in the podosphere. It's all over the place. It's all the different places that we publish it. And that was episode 232, Tecumel, The Empire of the Petal Throne, and Professor M.A.R. Barker with Robert Alberti. It was a great show. Tecumel not only has an incredibly rich history and a fascinating creator, but was the first published RPG setting in 1975. I mentioned a second ago that the podcast goes out in different places. It goes out on the blog at shaneplays.com. It's on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, Podbean, Amazon Music, YouTube, and more. And last but never least, Shane Plays is carried on Krypton Radio. Krypton Radio is sci-fi for your Wi-Fi. KryptonRadio.com. Now, if you would like to support the show, we do have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/Shane Plays. You can support for as little as $1 an episode. Another way you could support the show is on Twitter and on the Shane Plays Facebook page. I often put out affiliate links from Humble Bundle and occasionally others where you can get great deals on books, comic books, games, software, all kinds of cool stuff. And if you use my affiliate link, it puts just a little bit of money in my pocket, and I always appreciate that. So always pushing it out, like I said, on the Shane Plays Facebook page and on Twitter. As I often mention, I have 2 Twitter accounts. Shane Plays, ShanePlays, is my main Twitter account where I'm just very chatty and talk about anything and everything. If you just want the meat and potatoes, follow Shane Plays PR, ShanePlays PR. That's basically, I just give updates on the show, select news items, and affiliate links and that sort of thing. Last but never, ever, ever, ever least, I want to give a shout out to advertising partner Cursova Magazine, CIRSOVA, Cursova Magazine. It's the magazine of thrilling adventure and daring suspense. It's great if you love science fiction, fantasy, pulp fiction, that sort of thing. Cursova is carrying the torch. Excellent magazine. Definitely check it out. I'm glad to have them as an advertising partner. All right, that's it for the show notes. Thanks so much for listening. So, Shadows of the Demon Lord is the engine, the system that Asunder is using.
That's right.
Up to and including to narrative-wise, Gaia or Gaia, an in-character or an in-universe Asunder being could potentially challenge the Demon Lord. So there's a pretty strong connection there.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and we've talked about a lot about why Shadows of the Demon Lord is a good fit for Asunder as an independent. And one thing I want to make it, Asunder is an independent role-playing game. It's not a supplement for Shadows of the Demon Lord. It's you get Asunder, you get a complete game. What else would you say mechanics and system-wise is like unique for Asunder? Because what I'm hearing from you is like you couldn't.
Yeah, so the unique aspects of it, Shane, are, for example, in Asunder, there's no magic. There is chaos, right? And only people from the mainland can tie into it. And essentially, chaos was what the gods used to create things, but it's not meant for humans. It's wildly out of control. To use it, you acquire this thing called discord, right? And when you take on discord, it starts to do things for you. It starts to alter your appearance. You can blow up. It starts to do damage to you. And when you use chaos, you become it's addictive, and you want to push it. And so it can do more damage to you. So discord is a new characteristic that only exists in Asunder. And another thing called strain, which happens because in Asunder there's all kinds of symbiotic and living weapons made from plants, insects, and crustaceans, right? Depending on what island you're from and where your essence gives you bonding. And so when you take you can have an artillery cannon that's a living plant that attaches to your back, cuts into your skin, and it grows on your arm, and it shoots these incredible thorn blasts. It's amazing, but that thing is feasting on you a bit to stay alive. And so then you take on this thing.
So that's strain.
That's strain that affects that. And there are other things that can cause strain as well, too. And so these two things are different. And then we also use essence, which isn't used in Shadows of the Demon Lord, because Shadows of the Demon Lord uses a little bit more traditional magic than Asunder, where in Asunder what's happened is when humans were created, their essence, this like divine spark, and then bonded with different parts of the world and gave them control over it. And so the world, it's called Asunder because it's broken into pieces, was broken when the gods left. And so,
now when you say it was broken into pieces, do you mean literally like individual pieces of the planet are independent but next to each other, or like what do you mean by broken?
Like there was one big, like imagine Pangea theory, right? One big landmass, and then it was broken apart. Some islands even went into the sky. And so this essence bond gives people, power over gravity, the power to reshape plants or insects, or to take on the aspects of beasts, or to meddle with chaos. And so this essence is people's, so to speak, their innate power. And also in Asunder, there's only humans. There's no dwarfs and elves and etc. It's your essence that separates you and your island of origin.
So it's not Tolkien high fantasy. It's fantasy, but it's not Tolkien or what people think of as traditional D&D fantasy.
That's correct.
So what is it? What challenges what are the hooks for adventure in Asunder, other than the fact that Gaia at the center of the planet is trying to break free? Like what's a typical adventure in Asunder?
Yeah, so in Asunder, at the core of Asunder, players are playing seekers, right? And they've been called to adventure instead of necessarily for fame or fortune, though that could be tied into it too. It's because they've seen the signs that the end is coming. And other people around them don't believe, but seekers have seen it. And in some way, they've all had sort of a holy vision, if you will, in some way, whether they've seen the dead rise up, because in Asunder the dead rise, but it's through fungi infecting them, right? And they come, or they've seen the plagues in New Gaia, or they've met a demon, or some way they have seen, oh wait, the end is coming. And so they're seeking answers to either maybe stop it, maybe to end up on top when it falls, or whatever they choose. So the initial path...
But they know something's coming.
They know something is coming, and they're together because they're seeking an answer. And so the way the characters work is at each time you go up a level or change a path, your question or what you're seeking modifies, right? At first, you might seek an answer to what happened to your brother. Why did he disappear in the night, right? You think that's tied into the end of the world. And then it develops in that you realize, oh, your brother was taken by this cult. And so now what you're seeking is the end of the cult because you believe they're bringing it on. And so that's kind of the core engine, is that you're seekers of the answers to this mysterious world, and to save it. So maybe a typical adventure might be something like this. In what we're playing on with Amy and Satine, they're looking for Gaia's seed, which is this plant that can grow a new tree of knowledge. Or I should say a new great tree that the people in New Gaia have. And they believe that this can maybe help cure the world, right? So they are seeking this item, but things get nefarious in Asunder, right? And although it's not as dark in appearance as Shadows of the Demon Lord, which is awesome and amazing because we're in a verdant world, right? But it is dark and brutal.
Super verdant, like lethally verdant in
Bingo.
some ways.
That's exactly what it is. It's become dark and heavy because the world is tougher than you. The monsters are stronger. You have to be the threats are overwhelming. And so so an adventure might be something like that. Or it could be in a home game, somebody's was from Sky City, their family was disgraced, people were killed. And they're seeking revenge, right? Could be the impetus of it as one of the characters. Maybe another character has, because Asunder keeps the memories. Anything that's happened in Asunder is stored in the earth. And there's a path called Wanderers who can find those memories. And so one of the characters might have found a memory of something that they're seeking an answer for, right? They see a memory of this monstrous door in the earth. Well, what is that door and what does it lead to? Maybe that's the cure.
I don't think that it's a direct comparison, but it made me think of that tree in Avatar, where all of the villagers kind of put their memories in the tree and all that. So, it sounds like a really interesting world where there's still basically like automatic weapons and stuff, but it's plant based. It's all this crazy. Yeah, I mean, by automatic weapons, like you could shoot.
It's not automatic weapons in the sense like you would think of like a machine gun, but that you can have like there are mech suits in this world, but they're living.
It's all organic
suits. Yeah, and
it's almost like if everybody like. There for a while in DC Comics, Swamp Thing could do all kinds of crazy stuff with the planet.
That's a good way to.
It almost sounds a little bit like that. So what? Let me ask you this, and I know that you shared in our previous discussion that you're one of the people out there, which I salute this approach, that went, you know what, coronavirus is slowing everything down. I'm not just going to sit around and, watch TV or whatever. And if people want to sit around and watch TV, go for it. But there's some people who are like, I'm going to use this time to work on stuff I've been wanting to get to. And so you started working on like graphic novels and some other ideas. And obviously tabletop role-playing games was an interest of yours.
Yep.
So what is your history with tabletop role-playing games and why Asunder?
So Asunder, started about, I guess now it's over 6 years ago. And my history with them is it was my first love, right, was Dungeons and Dragons when I was young.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And I sort of grew from Dungeons and Dragons to World of Darkness. And I still play in a D&D group, but we play 5e that I love. It's great. Yuri Lowenthal and David Nett and a whole bunch of really cool folks play with me. And it's really great. But so it was just like, it was what I would say I owe all of my writing career in television to. It's what I would say when I'm on set directing TV or film, I'm just doing what I did in my bedroom in the 6th grade. And so it's at the core of me for sure. It's at the core of what I love, this ability to create these amazing characters and worlds and then to experience them. And with Asunder, I wanted to do it at the highest level I could, right? So there's 2 hardcover source books with super high-end art that cost a fortune, and it built out these 2 beautiful books. And
art, I have to point out, art costs a lot.
That's right.
If people want to get into role-playing game development and publishing, art costs a lot. If you want good art, you're going to pay for it.
Yeah, I mean, we commissioned over 160 images, right? Plus, we had minis built, custom dice, a novel written, and we crafted something that, because I feel like, same thing with the graphic novel. It's like, it might be my first, but for an audience member, it might be their 10th. And so it needs to feel like what they could get anywhere else. And it's, and even better. So that's why I went to Brian Engard. I crafted this world, and then I brought upon their expertise to make it into something that's truly solid and has no amateur mistakes, right? It's got some of the finest minds in role-playing games behind it. And then also my passion for it, and then this unique world. And then all of the bells and whistles to make it feel exciting when you hold it in your hands.
Right, so you're wanting to put out a really polished...
It is a really polished thing because it's done.
So
the game is all done.
Right.
The game's all done. The minis are done. The dice are all done in their digital states. Right now, it's getting them.
Right.
Yeah.
It's ready to. You know what you need to go into your Kickstarter with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. It's now. Is it going to be Kickstarter or Indiegogo?
This will be Kickstarter.
Which one's it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So it's going to be on Kickstarter. The show notes for this episode will either launch with the Kickstarter link, or I'll update it as soon as it's live. Do you have a pre-register Kickstarter page?
There's a pre-launch page.
Okay.
You can jump on in, and if you back at day 1, I have a 3-campaign module that you get for free in PDF form. You get that. There's also a quick start guide that's available now, so people can dive in and even start building a character today if they want.
So you said earlier that you started working on Asunder about 6 years ago. Did I hear that right? About 6 years ago, you started developing the setting?
That's
world?
right. That's right. So with my childhood friend, Landon Tom, who I used to play with, he and I met at Starbucks every other morning for a few months to bang out this world that we've always been kind of pondering. And that's what it became. And so it was something that I crafted and then built the right team. And, I had some help along the way from Hal Mangold and Chris Pramus.
who were wonderful to kind of point me in the right direction. And then Brian Engard, I can't say enough about him. His fingerprints are on every page.
You were talking with Brian, and Brian's the one that turned you on to Shadows of the Demon Lord, at like saying this might be a good fit for Asunder.
That's right, because I had initially come to Brian with the idea of crafting a new system altogether. And I had this thought for a game system with this dice pushing effect. And he said, Adam, I think that's maybe too ambitious of an undertaking. Based on what you described to me, I think you should look at this. And I looked at Shadows, and then I called Rob, and we worked out to use the system. And as soon as I read Rob's system, I was like, that's what we should do. And he's just
so is it?
No, it just has all the benefit of a truly play-tested, worked-through system. So
like Brian has been doing, and your team have been doing a lot of the development and adapting Shadows of the Demon Lord to Asunder, which has a lot of similarities, but as you mentioned earlier, there's a few differences. Rob has just been really supportive in here's how you can use my system.
Yeah. So we were able to license his system from him. And then he was very supportive, particularly with Brian, and then Brian wrote all the words on the pages that you see. So I essentially built like a 40-page, 50-page document initially that was the world and all the details of how the islands and how all the things would function. And then Brian took that and Rob's game and crafted out these 2 source books worth of material, which we did over the course of about a year and a half or 2 years.
So this has really been. This is okay.
Yeah.
Wow. This is not only did you start concepting 6 years ago, but the actual nuts and bolts have been.
Yeah, that's what when I say it's done. I mean the book is written. You can you can play it now. From just the book, yeah. And it's been through playtesting groups, and it's been through a series of things, yeah.
Well, okay, so that's a really interesting point that I'd like to explore with you. Up until you made Asunder, you and I were basically the same. Like, I played a lot of role-playing games, and I have a lot of ideas for role-playing games. And I think I know how it would go if I tried to make a role-playing game. But now that you've made one, how similar was it to the experience you were expecting?
Well, I think that it was what I expected it to be, the journey, right? Having taken many creative endeavors. And that is that there are lots of twists and turns, upsets and surprises and excitement along the way. And that it really requires a persistence of vision over a long period of time. I've pushed it up the hill myself for years, you know what I mean? And sometimes it sat, and sometimes it's sat with certain, on layout or other things took, 3 or 4 more months or 6 more months than you were hoping. And, it's all these things. It's taken so much effort to push it up the hill. And that's the thing that I am always certain of, is that it will require endless persistence. So
that matched, because you've done a lot of producing stuff in your life.
Yeah, I've directed and produced well over 100 episodes of TV and over 20 movies, and it takes persistence of vision, right?
Right.
It takes persistence.
So what changed? I'm assuming that some things changed during playtesting or as you were collaborating with others, and you got different people's perspective. What changed in Asunder that might have surprised you? Or were there any things going in you're like, this is a hill I will die on, we can't change this, and then maybe you ended up changing it after other people, collaborated with you?
It's interesting. I'm trying to think here, what was the one, like, the things, I guess, at first I initially had like, I'm going to die on this new system. And then I realized that was a mistake. And that was an idiot mistake. And I'm glad I got rid of that early on, and Brian really saw me through that. I would say like a few of the things is I wanted the game to feel raw and aggressive and it to feel a little bit no holds barred. And not no holds barred in the sense that your characters had tons of power, but it was no hold barred that the risks and the stakes were high. And I wanted it to feel not like Dungeons and Dragons. Not that I don't love it, but I can't be them. You can't do better than them at what they do, right?
Right. D&D is what it is. I mean,
Yeah, you can't.
They have that. They own that particular space the way that George Lucas owned Laser Sword.
That's ridiculous.
I mean, it's boom. Don't mess with it. Don't try to reinvent it.
They own it,
right.
And then Paizo with Pathfinder. Yeah. I mean, they just own that territory. And they own that territory, and so I needed to have something that looked different. The art was different. It felt different. It felt more Conan. It felt more raw because I can't do what they could do. I don't have the resources or a 70-year legacy. So that's why a lot of the choices I made was to help make it feel different and look different, so that if you're a fan of D&D, which I am, this is still exciting for you.
So how does it feel? And I'm guessing it's similar to seeing something you've written, acted out or something, but how does it feel to watch people play your game? I mean, are you like, oh, they're playing it exactly like I expected, or is it a pleasing feeling? What does that feel like?
I mean, it's pretty awesome. I mean, Amy Vorpal is the keeper on the show where it's being played right now, and I love Amy. I directed her in Sagas of Sundry. She was there for season 1 with me, and we just knew we were meant to work together. And she is a very aggressive storyteller, and she pushes things to the limit. And I selected a cast that was going to go there. But when I see it played, it's like you have that belief in your head, and then you give it to someone else, and you see what they do with it. And what's cool is she does it better than I do it, right? She does it her own way, but in the same world, right? Because it's, she's telling the story, and like with anything, like nobody plays D&D exactly the same, right? And it's so cool to see that, like, she got the gist of it. She gets the understanding of it. The players get what the world's about. They get the feeling. And that's an amazing thing when you say, hey guys, here's what I've created. And they go, yeah, I got it. I know it. It's like, I remember I've had this feeling a few times with the 8th and with my TV shows where I'll see somebody, I did this with Escape the Night, kids did a play and acted out episodes of the TV show. And, you make a TV show and you think people like it, you hope they like it. But then when you see somebody take it and make it their own, then they loved it. And that's, for me, the most profound feeling of all. So when I see Amy and I see these players play it, and I see them connect with the world, the same thing at the home game and the other play testers, you're humbled. I have a friend in Finland who did a whole round of notes on it with his group, right? So they're not Americans. They have a different point of view, a different world, right? And to see what came back from them, and to see that they got this and understood this thing and liked this part of it. And I was like, it's really about as satisfying as it gets.
That leads me kind of to my next question, people making it their own and loving it. And if this isn't something that you want to talk about, that's fine. But like when you approach Asunder with as much world building as you put into it and love as you put into it, are you like, man, all I want here is a tabletop RPG, or are you thinking about other like books, TV, or are you just like, what, this is my love letter to RPGs, and that's all I really care about here?
Well, I think with anything, it's exciting to see it become other things, to become games, to become other things, because it only helps bring the magic to more people. I remember I was having this conversation with Patrick Rothfuss. They were making an offer on The Name of the Wind from Lionsgate, and he and I were talking right before we did an episode of Tabletop. And he said, Adam, I'm worried, I got to give this out. And what happens if it goes wrong, And because I talked to him about how I found the book, and then I gave it to my in-laws, and then they all read it, and people who'd never read a fantasy novel had read it. And and I said, as long as there's more Kavothi, I'll take it anywhere. I can get it,
Right.
And I think the same thing is true here with Asunder. As long as I can see it in other places and see more people playing it and interacting with it and talking about it, it's all worth it. I don't think I've set out saying, oh, I can't wait for this to be a TV show. I set out to say, I can't wait for people to play this on Friday night. That's what's in my heart, right? To do what role-playing games did for me and still do. That's what I would really like.
Okay, that's cool. The genesis of that question, just so you know, like I know a local comic book company would that is really putting a lot of resources into making comic books. But the closer I got to them, they shared this is really about IP generation. The comic books are just a means to an end. But the passion that I hear in your heart for the role playing games and D&D and all that, led me to think that you might be like, yeah, whatever. This is, if it went somewhere cool, but my first priority is simply the tabletop role playing game experience. So I want to ask a couple of other questions, and then we've got to. Sadly, the time always goes so quickly. On how would you describe? We've described a little bit about why people would adventure in Asunder and the kinds of adventures and the overall meta story that's going on underneath all the world building. How would you describe it as dark fantasy? Would you describe it? You mentioned Conan, Pulp Fiction. I mean, how would you describe?
Yeah, it's a dark fantasy. It's a dark fantasy with real stakes and real complications, and things hurt and bleed, and it's sexy and more mature in its nature. So I would call it definitely dark fantasy.
So, on a scale of 1 to 10, how crunchy is it? Is it the equal crunchiness to Shadows of the Demon Lord?
Yeah, I would say it's on the same exact page. I mean, if you were to say Dread is a 1, right?
Right.
And if I were to say, 10 is Twilight Imperium, or if I were to say, is it 10?
Let's call 10 GURPS.
GURPS, yeah. Get 10 is GURPS, right?
And 1 is, which I love GURPS, by the way.
Yeah, but call GURPS a 10.
Yeah.
I'd probably say it's more like somewhere in the neighborhood of like a 5 to 7. Maybe 7 at tops, depending on which path you choose, but somewhere in that neighborhood.
Okay, and there's definitely narrative stakes. There's combat.
Yep.
Sounds like all the good stuff there. So, all right. Well, let's finish off on the Kickstarter. What can you share about what people will find at the Kickstarter?
So the Kickstarter has 3 tiers. The first is the digital tier. You get 2 source books and the novel. So we have the Keeper's Guide and the Seeker's Guide and the Keeper's Tome, and then we have a novel called The Gathering of Chaos. So the digital path gets you all 3 of those. Then there is the Seeker's Path, and that gets you the hardcover of the Seeker's Guide and the print version of the novel, plus the digital versions. And then we have the Keeper's Path, which gets you 2 source books. It gives you custom dice. It gives you a keeper's screen, and the novel and any unlocked stretch goals. And the stretch goals we're unlocking are minis. So we have 9 potential to unlock, 6 what I would say seeker characters, and then 3 monsters, a Naga, a demon, and a Devourer. And so if you pick the final tier, you get the however many minis we unlock, you get them. You get a set of those. The minis will be available as an add-on afterwards in Backer Kit, wherever we got to. And if you back day 1, there's a 3-episode campaign module that you get for free. If you miss day 1 on that, then you can buy it as an add-on later as well. But that's what the campaign is. They're beautiful, glossy, hardbound books at the same quality level as a Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook, with art on the same level, though I would say sexier and more dynamic, and images with characters and places you've never seen. There are no people in bright, shiny armor. There are people with living cannons. There are seafarers who have, in place of a kneecap, they have a mouth and an extra limb. There are skimmers who can leap, hundreds of feet, and they have these like spore packs on their back that let them sort of jettison places. So they're people in places you've never seen, and at the most dynamic level.
I've always loved that sort of bioorganic aesthetic to not replicate, but to do the same things that technology can, right?
Yeah.
That's always been a really interesting aesthetic. I don't know what you call it. I don't know if you call it plant punk. So
yeah. And it's cool. And then there's even like a small faction of insect weavers who got kind of cursed, or some say they're cursed, I think blessed, who can kind of reshape insects into things. And they're sort of disliked publicly, but they're the sort of the outcasts, but they have a very powerful gift. So that's what you can get in the campaign. It's the full ride. It's what you would hope to get, right? And when it shows up, you will be grateful you did it.
Do you know what your reward levels will be for those three tiers? Like what the level is? Yeah.
So the digital path is $40. It's pretty amazing. It's 2 source books in the novel. The Seeker's Path, which is the hardcover of the Seeker's Guide and a print version of the novel, plus the digital versions, is $50. And then it's $115 for the Keeper's Path, which is both source books, the Keeper's Screen, the dice, and whatever stretch goals we unlock.
Everything printed.
Yeah, everything all in print. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because if you're going to drop like a hardback RPG book these days is $50-$60 easy.
That's right.
So that's great. Well, man, that sounds really good. And do you know what your goal is? Like your minimum goal is for the Kickstarter?
Yes, to make our print run minimum, right, is $35,000, and that's what we've got in there right now. So we can cover essentially the setup costs, the preliminary marketing costs, and also to get the print run done. It's $35,000, so that's our funding goal. And then after that, and we've got that for sure, then we can start unlocking the minis and paying for those mold costs, etc.
It sounds really cool, man. I haven't yet, but I'm going to, and I'm going to watch these actual plays. You've sent me the links. You've sent me I don't think a press kit is the right word for it, but I've seen some of the artwork for Asunder, and it does look very cool. And I'll link in the show notes. People can always go to shaneplays.com, and I always have show notes for each episode, and I'll have those actual plays and links up there too. So, and folks, don't forget, and this always, get the quick start. Check it out. Take a look at. You can check out the quick start before you decide what you think, and that's always a great thing to do. So, would you any final thoughts there before I assault you with the bad joke of the week?
No, I think that's it. I think it's all been said.
You're right. Well, thanks for coming on again. I really enjoy talking with you, and I will definitely be keeping an eye on Asunder to see how it does. It sounds like a really neat setting. I've got to do it to you, Adam. And once again, I forgot to send you the waiver, so don't sue me. All right. Here we go. Why do paladins wear chainmail?
I have no idea.
Because it's holy armor.
Oh, ooh, that one stung.
You want a special bonus one? Because you're in LA.
Let's do it.
Right?
Let's do it. Yes.
You're in LA, so I'll throw this one out for you for being around LA. I just bought a limousine and found out it doesn't come with a driver. I can't believe I spent all that money with nothing to show for it.
Oh.
I got 1 million of them. All right, man. Well, thanks again for your time. Best of luck and wind in your sails with the Asunder RPG, and thanks yet again for your time.
Thanks so much, Shane. Appreciate it, buddy.
All right, man. And folks, we will talk to everybody next time on Shane Plays Geek Talk, and thanks for listening.
Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.